Welcome and thank you for being with us for a forum to discuss the El Cerrito Measure C. We appreciate your attendance. My name is Genoveva Calloway of the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County. I will be the moderator. We are co-hosting this forum with Livable El Cerrito. The League of Women Voters is a trusted membership organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties. For decades, we have offered fair and balanced forums. The League participates in advocacy and voter education. This forum is presented by the education arm of the League. The League is very proud of our history of civil discourse and nonpartisan forums. This is an educational event, not a debate. Before we get started, there are some details to review that will help you interact with this session. Microphones are muted for everyone except the presenters and the moderator. Video images will show the presenters and the moderator. Presenters will stay on screen for the entire forum and will mute until it is their turn to speak. Chat has been turned off for attendees. We are recording this forum, as you heard, and we will be posting it via our websites and social media, such as YouTube, for the broader community to access. Today's measure form focuses on the El Cerrito Library Tax Measure C. Each presenter will proceed with a 5-minute introduction and then a rebuttal amongst each other for 3 minutes each. And then the questions would be up to 2 minutes. Please be succinct. So let's see. Each presenter will do a closing statement at around 6:20. So we have to be aware of our time. And then we will close the session. Questions for this forum have been solicited in advance from the community and from our local league. We have screened the questions to ensure that they are fair and unbiased and to avoid duplication and anything inappropriate. The questions have been submitted to both campaigns. The chat function will not be active. A countdown timer is on the screen. The clock will signal the candidates of their remaining time and when their turn is up. As moderator, I may verbally give prompts as well. Remember that if you go over time, I will remind you. I will attempt to allow you to finish your sentence, but then we'll ask you to stop. Our presenters are Greg Lyman, representing the campaign supporting Measure C, and Wally Nowinski, representing the campaign opposing Measure C. We will begin with the supporters' opening statement. Mr. Lyman, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Yep, great. Well, good evening. I am Greg Lyman, a 36-year resident in El Cerrito, retired homeowner and former Rec and Park Commissioner and a former El Cerrito City Council member. I am also one of the proponents and signature gatherers for the petition to put this Measure C on the ballot June 2nd. Yes on C is a progress to improve our city by building a safe, modern library. We ask you to join with the many people that signed the petition to put this on the ballot and vote yes on C. Check out our stories at www.anewelcerritolibrary.com. And so now I'm going to share my screen, which means I have to do this and pick this one to share. Great. So let's start at the beginning. And so both the city and the Yes on C websites provide access to many documents. This is the city's website page with lots of background information. Here's the Measure C page. The only document the Yes on C created is the proposed ordinance as required by law. The rest were prepared by the city of El Cerrito, BART, or the BART's developer. Here is a summary of what those documents say. The existing library is 77 years old. It was built in 1948, does not have air conditioning, does not meet current seismic standards or disability codes, has to close when it's hot or smoky, can only offer limited programs, can only be open a maximum of 46 hours a week. Meanwhile, the city of El Cerrito is growing. We have 26,000 residents today, and we'll add between 750 and 1,000 residents over the next 3 years. Library planning standards suggest a city of our size should have roughly 13,000 to 26,000 square feet of library space. The city's own 2014 needs assessment recommended about 20,000 square feet. But Measure C is not just about square footage. It provide story time for toddlers and tutoring for teens. Libraries support seniors pursuing lifelong learning. They help immigrants learn English. They offer internet access, job search support, meeting rooms, study spaces, and community gathering spaces. Libraries, one of the few public spaces where everyone is welcome, regardless of age or income. That's why this matters. Now let's turn to the nuts and bolts. The proposed law would create a special parcel tax up to 17 cents per square foot of habitable space for the sole purpose of building a new library and covering 10 years of city's library operating costs above the county baseline. The cap can only be increased with inflation, but only if expenses justify it. The tax must end 30 years after first bonds are sold. The city council sets the tax rate annually and may collect only what they actually need to cover costs, debt, reasonable reserves, maintenance, and repair. All expenses must be separately audited and reviewed by a citizens oversight committee. Measure C does not lock the city into one rigid design, one site, or one exact building size. Years before negotiations, design work, engineering, and public input should occur. Instead, it creates the funding needed to build a real planning process with the community. That process matters. If Measure C passes, residents will help shape the decisions about size, design, location, and parking and amenities. Whether it's a 2-story building on the current Stockton site, or 20,000 square feet library at Fairmont and Liberty, or a standalone building on San Pablo Avenue, the city needs a dedicated funding source. That dedicated funding source also unlocks grant opportunities, many of which require matching funds. Measure C enables the city to compete for these grants and potentially reduce the tax burden. The Yes on C website has a calculator that estimates the proposed tax for your specific square footage based on 5 different alternatives the city has studied. The average household would pay about $87.55 over the anticipated 32 years, and the tax ranging from $158 to $366, with the average tax being about $247. I'll stop there.
You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have the opening statement of the opponents. Mr. Nowinski, you have 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks for attending. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Wally Nowinski, and I'm here for Neighbors for a Better El Cerrito. We are over 650 of your neighbors, including librarians, longtime homeowners, renters, former city officials who love libraries but believe Measure C is a bad deal for our community. You may have seen our signs around town. This isn't a vote about whether we like libraries or love what libraries can do. It's not a vote about if El Cerrito has a library. This vote is about whether or not Measure C is a good plan, and it's not. If Measure C passes, El Cerrito residents will, over the first 30 years, pay around $100 million in taxes. And if City Council gets their way, and we believe what they said they intend to do, that money will go towards a library at the BART TOD project on land we will never own, in a building with no completed design, that has not applied for state financing and may never be built, or not be built on any reasonable timeline. The city and the Yes campaign have told us lots of great things about what might happen with this measure, and lots of things about how they believe the measure would be interpreted. They said that this tax would stay modest. They said that the BART project would be just $21 million, even when the city knew behind the scenes that that price was exploding. And they said that seniors would be protected. And we've also heard city officials say that they would never use the library tax to cover the portion of any employee's salary, even though the law actually enumerates cases where they're allowed to do this. But what I'm going to talk about is not the promises. They don't carry the weight of law. What I'm going to talk about is what's actually in the bill, because that's what it does. This measure lets City Council raise a tax every single year without coming back to the voters. It is not pegged to US inflation. It is pegged to the higher of two rates of a local inflation measure. It is specifically designed to increase faster than national inflation rates. If you backdate this over the last 30 years using the measure that's in the fine print, it's been about 4 to 5% per year. This measure contains this measure gives the people of El Cerrito no voice in where the library goes. Greg has just told us that he thinks people will have a voice. That's not written into the law. It doesn't need to happen. What it does is it throws the entire thing to City Council, and the city has told us what they plan to do. It's in their strategic plan. It's the BART proposal, and a majority of City Council members have already committed that that's what they want to do. This measure contains no guarantee that a library will actually be built. There's a 30-year clock, but that starts only once bonds are issued. The city can and will start collecting taxes before then to pay for consultants, to pay for a special election that was $80,000 that they've called, to pay for legal defense that's coming because this is very likely going to be overturned at the end of the year with a constitutional amendment. This plan is a great deal for BART, for related companies, and for the people in City Hall who've been working on this BART TOD library scheme for over a decade. Unfortunately, it is a bad deal for our community. Now, I want to spend 1 minute here on the senior exemption because I think it tells you something about how this measure was put together. The Yes campaign featured a senior exemption prominently in their materials. The city attorney put it into the ballot language. The message is, don't worry, seniors, you will be protected. Now, why do this? Well, the answer is easy, because 40% of ballots are going to be cast by people over 62 years old. But the fine print written in the proposal makes it essentially impossible to qualify. In fact, El Cerrito already had a parcel tax with similar language that this was based on. And the city admits no one's ever qualified for it, in part because the city never even bothered to write an application. Meanwhile, the people hit hardest by Measure C, low-income renters, low-income seniors who are renting their homes who don't own them, they get nothing at all. No exemptions. Albany solved this problem. They rebate low-income households parts of their parcel taxes. That could have been in this proposal. It wasn't. For more than a decade, the city has been working towards one outcome: a library inside a housing development at the El Cerrito Plaza BART station. Every step of this decade-long process has been organized around BART's timeline and private developer financing. People of El Cerrito and what we actually want in a library have unfortunately taken a backseat. A no vote on Measure C does not close our library. The library we have on land we own, operated by the county, stays open exactly as is. A no vote sends the city back to the drawing board with a clear message. The next plan has to be built around what El Cerrito needs, not what BART and the BART project need. We can do better than Measure C, and I urge you to vote now.
Thank you very much. Now we have each 3-minute rebuttal. So Greg Lyman, please, you have 3 minutes.
You're muted.
Muted. Greg, you're muted.
Yep.
Thank you.
Tonight, you'll hear both sides say they love libraries and that our positions are rooted in the same documents. So this becomes two sides to the same documents. Where opponents see the glass half empty, Yes on C sees the glass half full, a safe modern library operating in 4 years. Where opponents see dishonesty and conspiracy, Yes on C trusts our local government, the same government that provides the basic infrastructure of our community, police, fire, roads, and libraries, and then verify with annual audits and oversight committees. Where opponents see financial waste and ruin, Yes on C sees a community investing in our collective future. Where opponents want to delay, Yes on C wants to move forward now, before costs rise even higher. Where opponents focus on worst case scenarios, Yes on C sees the benefits of flexibility and nimbleness to avoid costly mistakes. Where opponents argue against one alternative, Yes on C supports a robust, vetted process to create the library we want and deserve, right-sized and in both space and cost, and that is in the law. Where opponents are demanding the city spend money it does not have on studies to define the perfect tax, Yes on C sees delay itself as the enemy of our collective good. Measure C allows residents to solve the library problem ourselves without worsening the city's existing financial challenges. And that's really the choice before us. We can continue debating indefinitely while construction costs rise and the current building deteriorates further, or we can move forward. No proposal is perfect, but waiting for a perfect plan before taking any step forward often means nothing happens at all. Measure C is a practical, flexible, community-driven approach. It creates accountability, it creates options, and most importantly, it creates momentum towards a new library our community deserves. El Cerrito has always invested in our future. We've invested in parks, public safety, environmental leadership, and community spaces because we understand that strong public infrastructure improves quality of life for everyone. A modern library belongs in that tradition. We urge you to vote yes on Measure C so that we can start that process of building a new library. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nowinski?
Yeah. One of the things that our volunteers have constantly heard on the doors, Greg talked about investing in our future and investing in infrastructure, is a huge disappointment that the city has not invested enough in the infrastructure, in maintaining the infrastructure we have. Our library could be better. Absolutely, everyone agrees with that. Our senior center no longer exists. We passed special taxes to keep the pool up to date, and all of a sudden we're dipping into emergency funds to fix up the pool facility. And one of the concerns we hear is if we can't keep up what we have, if the city is not investing in that, why should we be putting the largest parcel tax in city history up to build something new while a lot of our key services around us, including our roads, are deteriorating? Now, Greg talked about a couple key things here. And honestly, the ballot question that Greg is describing to us, I wish that's what they wrote. I really do. Because, we heard that this unlocks grants. Well, it doesn't require the city to get any grants, and it could have. We heard about senior protections. It didn't actually do that, and it could have. It could have protected low-income renters too. We heard about oversight. The Oversight's an advisory citizens committee. It doesn't do anything. It could have had teeth, but it doesn't. We could have had a good proposal that would bring this community together, and unfortunately, Measure C falls short. It falls short on all of these things. And again, I would bring you back to the point I made at the start of my comments, that a promise, a hopeful story, an optimistic vision, that's different than the fine print that's in the law. And I wish as a community we were in a space where, everyone thought everything was going great and we could write a check that gives city council, I believe, as Greg has said in previous forums like this, whatever financial room they need to build whatever library they decide on. But we're not really a community where city council has that much faith. And that's unfortunate. That's not great. El Cerrito's had stronger days in the past. I hope it can have stronger days in the future. But I just don't think we have a lot of competing priorities. We're going to talk about that later. We have, a deteriorating public safety building. We have deteriorating roads. The largest parcel tax earmarked specifically for this library, which, again, a majority of city council members have said they want it at the BART station. This law allows them to do that. If Measure C supporters didn't want it at the BART station and wanted it to literally be up to citizens, they could have said the city will select a site and then we'll have another referendum on it. But that's not what's in the law. The law gives that authority to the city. So you need to ask yourself, should we believe city council when they tell us they want to put it at the BART station? I do.
Thank you. Thank you. Now to the questions. You will each have 2 minutes to answer each question. Please be succinct so we can cover as many as possible. We will have a hard stop at 6:20 p.m. and then transition to your closing statements. The first question is, and we will start with Greg, is how much is the tax?
The tax starts out at 17 cents, as the law specifies. But the tax is really going to depend on which alternative is selected. So I'm going to share my screen real quick to walk you guys through a potential calculator. So this calculator is at our website, and this is currently set up for the average home, 1,950 square feet. Scenario 2, without parking, $28 million. And that tax would cost that average home $6,800 over the life of the tax, 32 years. If we switch this over to the TOD Plaza location, that same house is only paying $87.55. And the calculator can tell you exactly what your tax rate is on any given year. So the highest it would be is $366. So essentially $1 a day for the highest tax rate associated with that. So the tax is to cover debt and construction. And so when you're starting looking at a $36 million borrow, you're 2 to 1 is the typical rule of thumb right now for borrowing. So you're looking at about $75 million between construction and borrowing, and then another $8 million for operations and $2 million for planning. So you're just around was that $82-83 million. So nowhere near the $100 million that Wally threw out earlier.
Thank you. Your answer now, 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I can just tell you what is in the law. And the law was written specifically to allow the city to have not a blank check, but financial room to spend whatever they need to spend based off of whatever cost ends up being. Now, the calculator that Greg has shared now and previously, it has assumptions baked in. But what we saw when they started gathering signatures, the cost of the BART TOD Plaza was $21 million. Shortly after signatures were submitted early this year, all of a sudden that cost is up 75%. Construction costs are going to be going up very, very rapidly over the next several months, or over the next several years, due to the data center boom. Those costs could easily jump another 25%, at which point even this large tax can no longer pay the expenses needed, to cover the debt issuance. So what I would say is we should not look at what we hope the outcome should be. We should look at what is written in the law. And what is written in the law is a tax that starts at 17 cents per square foot that can be raised by city council by one of two measures, again, specifically designed to go up faster than inflation. One of the measures there is Bay Area personal income growth. So all those AI salaries in San Francisco, if those keep going up faster than inflation, which they're going up quite quickly, that's one of the factors that can go into this tax increase and what the ceiling is. And so that's one, it can go up very fast. And two, the construction costs, Greg is right, they are rising. They are rising much faster than the 6% in here. And the 5% interest rate that's assumed in here is also, shall we say, extraordinarily optimistic when we saw just last week that inflation is accelerating again. So I cannot tell you exactly what the total cost will be. I can tell you what it was designed to allow, and what it was designed to allow starts at 17 cents and goes up 4 to 5% every year after that. We also don't know when the building will start. Could be a decade in the future.
Thank you. The next question is what will the average homeowner pay? Mr. Lyman?
Yeah, again, I will share my screen real quick because I just answered that question. The average homeowner will pay $87.55 for the TOD alternative. The similar alternative is the scenario 2, rebuilding with parking, and the average homeowner will pay a maximum of $320, and over the life of the debt tax, it would be less than $8,200.
Um, the average homeowner will start paying 17 cents per square foot, and that number can go up 4 to 5% per year. Again, the calculator is assuming a building that starts roughly on time. There's some other options in there. It's assuming interest rates that are very conservative. Again, inflation is picking up. Construction costs in California are spiraling. We've all seen what's happened with high-speed rail and the data center boom. And there is literally no reason to believe whatsoever that the BART project is going to start anytime soon, much less in 2 years. They have not applied for any other funding yet. That is an arrested development. So if we went with that project, we could be paying the consultant fees and also legal fees for years before that ever breaks ground. And I will use this opportunity to talk about some of the other things that this tax can pay for, because it's not just the construction. It's the consultants. It's, Greg's calling it planning, fine. It's also legal defense. And this, because there's not a question about this, or not till later, this ballot question is very likely to be overturned in November by a statewide constitutional amendment. And as written, the city can use the tax revenue to pay for its own legal defense. I would have suggested we do something prudent, like have the election in November, so we didn't tax ourselves to pay for a losing legal defense fund. But that's not what the city wanted to do here. They wanted to spend $80,000, again, that's coming out of our taxes, because they thought it would be easier to pass this in June, when turnout will be a little lower than in November.
Thank you very much. Third question, how will it change over time? Mr. Lyman?
Yeah, so this is certainly one place where Wally and I disagree about the reading of the tax measure, because the tax measure has two limits on it. Wally is focused on just one. He's focused on the maximum tax rate as opposed to the actual tax rate. The actual tax rate that the city council can set can only be used for actual costs and debts and expenses. So it would not be the maximum rate on day one. Unless they anticipate that they've got $3.1 million worth of expenses in that first year. Since the planning is expected to be $3 million over 2 years, the tax rate would be about 8 cents. So it would go 8 cents, then construction would start. It would go up to 13 cents a square foot. And then during the operations period, it would go up to 17.5%. So if it had been set at 17 cents and capped at 17 cents, that last couple of years of operations, when the city would have to be supplementing that with funds from their general fund. And then once the operations period ends, the tax rate will drop significantly back down to, say, 13 cents a square foot or less. And so that, and be constant through the life of the balance of the tax. So this is one place where we'll have to agree to disagree, because what was written is not that they can just charge you the maximum every year. They can only charge you what they plan to spend. And in which case, during the loan period, it is just the construction loan. Even a $37 million project would be about 13 cents.
Yeah, I would say it is just what they plan to spend, but I think that, that is, again, assuming what they're going to spend it on is entirely just library construction. We need to spend $80,000 to hold this election in June, because the city and Measure C supporters wanted to have it in June instead of having it for free in November. We are likely going to need to spend a lot of money on legal defense because of A, the Jarvis Amendment, and B, the city council, quite frankly, acting inappropriately, trying to support what is supposed to be an independent citizens initiative. So add that to the tax bill during the planning stage as well. The city has shown that it is enormously creative and enormously enterprising when it comes to spending money on library consultants. We've been doing it for over a decade. I would expect that to continue and those bills to increase now that they have dedicated funding for it. Now, into the 13 cents, once construction happens, again, that's if construction happens at today's prices with optimistic interest rates. If interest rates go up, if it's delayed, if prices go up another 25, 30, 40%, remember, they jumped 75% from when they started collecting signatures to today. There's no reason at all to believe that they're not going to continue going up. So the answer is we don't know exactly what the maximum tax rate is going to be. But this, again, the fine print is written in such a way that it gives the city tremendous latitude to spend it. And they're also allowed to collect 115% of what they need in every single year with no true up at the end. So they can over collect 15% every year with no mechanism for balancing that out.
Thank you very much. The next question, what is the highest the tax rate can go? Mr. Lyman?
Yeah, so the tax rate is capped by a maximum amount, which Wally has focused on. However, the real actual tax rate is only as much as they can actually collect. And so that amount is going to be below the maximum amount under most scenarios. If we as a community decide to build a standalone library on San Pablo Avenue, then costs will be higher, and we might be bumping up against the maximum rate for the first 5 or 6 years of operations. At which point the city would decide whether they want to have those extra 16 hours above the county baseline or not. One of the things that Wally has just said in his previous answer is that construction rates are going up really fast, and they are. And the reason to have it in June is because a 5-month delay is about $500,000 in construction. So it's way more appropriate for us to be investing in making this decision so that we have the time between now and next year to decide what size library we want. And that's the best way to keep the prices down, is to move forward and not delay. And a delay is only going to increase cost, as Wally has said. So moving forward is the correct way to keep costs down. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think it does.
Thank you. The same question, what is the highest tax rate can go?
I mean, the highest tax rate can go that is allowed by the statute, by the fine print, is 17 cents plus whatever is higher. Bay Area personal income growth, or California, cost of living, both of which are higher than the annual inflation rate. That is what is limiting it. Then there's also, as Greg has mentioned before, limits on, they can only collect 115% of what things actually cost. We've gone through other things that are allowed to spend there: a special election, lawyers' fees, consultant fees, planning fees, a tax administrator who's a city employee, etc. But the key thing is, if the building, like what we are writing here is essentially, the fine print is like a blank check for the library, for the city to do whatever it wants and to give it a clean pass to not constrain costs. The city has no incentive to constrain costs if they know they are going to be able to increase the tax rate 6% each year. So the last thing Greg said, and I'll just go back to this, is that any delay increases costs, and that would be true if shovels were ready to go in the ground, but there is not a single shovel-ready project here. So whether we have this election in June or November does not delay when ground is broken. Not at all, because the city's preferred plan, the one 4 out of 5 city councilors have said that they support, they haven't even applied for their other state funding yet. We have no idea when that's going to start. We could have saved $80,000 had this election in in November, and at the very least not have wasted that money. I bring this up because it shows us a picture of what we can expect from the city when they have this taxing authority. Are they going to be super conservative and prudent with every dollar? No, they've just shown they won't be by having a special election instead of doing it for free.
Okay, thank you very much. Is this a forever tax, Mr. Lyman, and then Mr. Nowinski?
No, it is not a forever tax. The tax ends 30 years after bonds are issued. So right now, we're anticipating 32 to 33 years, construction starting in 2 years. And to address, what the timing of this and why it's important for us to move forward with June. in paragraph 4.58.060, use of tax. So use of tax, how we can use it. Revenue from the special tax, including penalties, etc. Second sentence, the city council shall implement a process that will actively engage residents regarding 1, the design of the new library, 2, improvements to the library, 3, library services, 4, other matters regarding the expenditures of the special tax revenues received by the city under this chapter. So in order for us to have a robust discussion and input on what the design will be, we needed to start in June, because the cost estimates that the city put forward were based on construction starting in January of 2028. So as much as he says a 5-month delay wouldn't matter, it does. Because if you don't start that planning process until November of this year, and you need 9 months for a robust planning process with the public input, and then another 9 months to do the design, you can't start construction in January of 2028. So $80,000 for to save $500,000 in construction is a good investment.
We're not going to start construction in January 2028, though. Like, no one thinks that. Related Companies doesn't think that. Like, that's my key point, is right now the city's preferred plan is to put this in what is an arrested development. It is years behind schedule. They're not moving forward on it at all. We get confusion about this because people see this other unrelated parcel by the El Cerrito BART Plaza station. That's a different company. That's related. That's totally... that's not related. Related is the developer name. Totally unrelated to the building that the library would go in. The building that the library would go in, it's not going anywhere. Certainly not in January 2028. Onto the forever tax front. If we do not know when this tax will end. We've heard that if everything goes super well and we break ground in January 2028, it could end in 32 years. But I would note when signatures were being gathered, we were told that would be 30 years. So I'm glad we've moved a little bit closer towards the reality of the situation. But again, in the fine print, what it says is that the tax can be collected for 30 years after bonds are issued. It does not say when bonds need to be issued. It does not give any deadline. Hey, if the city hasn't got its act together within 5 years, we just need to wind the whole thing down. We could go another decade. We spent a decade paying consultants to plan a library. Don't have anything to show for it yet. We could do that for another decade with this new tax fund picking up the tab and still not have a library and still not have issued bonds. And in fact, I think that's like the most likely outcome, if we're being honest. So we don't know when this tax will end. It's not 32 years. It's not 30 like we were promised. And on top of that, there is the city's own reports say that after if the library is built 10 years after that happens, we would no longer cover the operating costs. So that's a $797,000 new tax or cuts to services that we're going to need to pick up the tab.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask that because we try to include all the questions that were asked, and it's taken us longer if we take 2 minutes for each question. If the answer has already been stated by either one of you, we would appreciate just not repeating it in order to go to all the questions. Otherwise, we're going to have to cut the questions to get to other questions, other sections that we have.
I suggest we had a lot of questions there that were very, very similar. Could I suggest we maybe jump around a bit to get more variety?
Yeah, and also if the question is similar, then it would be appreciated to just say it's been answered already by you. And so we can move on. What safeguards are there in Measure C to prevent the library tax from becoming a forever tax? Is 1 minute?
Yep, 1 minute is fine. So the provision is that it ends 30 years after the bonds are issued, and that is what we've told people during signature gathering. So to say that we said it was a 30-year tax is not accurate. And they can only collect what they need to spend, so they can't collect the maximum by automatically. They have to determine what it is, and that's the story, that it's limited by multiple provisions in the tax to exactly what's being collected, and it is and the city is going to be in a much better situation in a decade with regards to CalPERS, and they'll be able to resume paying for it from the general fund.
Thank you. Mr. Nowinski, can you stick to the 1 minute so we can go around? I'm going to move it along. Thank you.
There's a stopwatch that has no start button. That's what this tax is. It's a stopwatch with no start button. There could have been a start button, like many things we talked about. This could have been written a different way, and it wasn't. And so I can only react not to what the intentions are, but to what the fine print is, what the actual law is. So that's where we're at. And then Greg mentioned this a second ago, but this does open up a $797,000 deficit after 10 years, should the library ever be built. Right now we're a city that has a lot of competing priorities. We have a decrepit police station. We have crumbling roads. We have pools that we're dipping into emergency funds to try to fix up, and many other priorities. And we have a $2 million and change budget deficit that we're looking at this year. I don't think we should be voting for a measure that is going to drop another $797,000 on that, according to the city. Because what that requires is what El Cerrito residents have seen before, which is another new tax.
The next question, what happens to tax revenue if the housing project is never funded or not funded for many years?
Yeah, so the tax would only be collected if there's an anticipation of construction. And so if there's no anticipation of construction, the tax won't be collected. What taxes will be collected in the first 2 years, it will go towards planning, the $3 million for interacting with the public and then designing construction drawings. If as the opponents are saying that POD is being delayed, the city should pivot to something that they can move forward immediately, like a 2-story library at Stockton Avenue. So this is not locking the city into a specific plan. And if things change, they should pivot and do something that can allow it to be built for the least cost possible.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the question again? Could you repeat it?
What happens to tax revenue if the housing project is never funded or not funded for many years?
There's no refund clause. So they will collect taxes to pay for the planning that Greg mentioned, to pay for the tax administrator's salary that's specified. The salary isn't, but the position of a tax administrator is, to pay for consultants, to pay for the $80,000 special election that we're having that we didn't need to have. There's all kinds of things that they can collect taxes for the legal defense that they're almost surely going to need to mount come the end of the year. That's going to be expensive. So the problem with this tax, from my perspective, is that there's no start button on the stopwatch, and it just gives the city has shown no lack of creativity over the last decade when it comes to spending money on library-related consultants, and a very little urgency about actually getting a library delivered during that time. I have no reason to believe they won't do that for another decade.
Thank you. So we're going to stick to the 1 minute for my timekeeper too. We're going to operating costs. How will the library operating costs be covered after the first 10 years in year 11 and beyond?
Yeah, let me see if I can bring up the graphic I have for that really quick. I will share, and I can do this in less than a minute. So this is a graphic that was presented to the City Council in May of 2025. It talks about the unfunded liabilities. You can see in 2026, we're already having to pay about $8 million in cost. That goes away by the time we get to 2040. Let's say we're under construction and done and operating by 2040. The unfunded liability is down around $4 million. So that's more than enough general fund available for the operating costs at that time.
Mr. Nowinski.
I would just say that every dollar that we are setting ourselves up and pre-committing to this new larger library project is a dollar that is not going to other El Cerrito priorities. I am not here to tell people what is most important, but I will say what we hear our volunteers here on the doors is they're very concerned about that. They're concerned that we are not maintaining the buildings we have. that we have a decrepit police and fire station, that our roads are falling apart. You know, the city, all of us collectively, we have so much resources that we can invest. And what we're asking, the Neighbors for a Better El Cerrito, we just think that this is not the right plan. It's not the right structure. It is a large check for the city to basically build whatever they want, regardless of how expensive it is. And that's just going to gobble up a lot of the city's resources going into the future. And we need to go back to the drawing board and have an honest discussion about priorities.
Okay, locations, that's related to locations. What locations were evaluated for a new library, Mr. Lyman?
Yeah, for a new library going back over a decade ago, there was the Korematsu, at that point, Portola Middle School pad that we looked at replacing the community theater. We've looked at even using San Pablo Avenue locations. The most recent projections were building at the existing site, using the TOD site, buying a parcel on San Pablo Avenue, or even using Marshall's on San Pablo Avenue as a potential location. So those are all the locations that are under consideration, and the city council should be fiscally prudent with this tax and use the alternative that they can afford. Whether it's all scenario 2 or scenario 3, those are the ones that are affordable at this time, and we should be moving forward with those as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Nowinski.
I think the key thing to realize about the location is that this proposal, as written, gives the city the authority to do what it wants on this. There is no binding. There is, Greg mentioned it earlier, that there has to be some sort of citizens advisory commission. There's nothing binding about it. There's no binding citizen's choice on where we want the new library to be. This is going to be expensive. It's going to be the most expensive parcel tax in the city's history. And right now, as written, it throws it to the city council and it allows them to increase the taxes every year in order to pay for whatever that might be. We hear from a lot of people who really want a new library, and they just do not like the BART TOD plan. But that is the plan that 4 out of 5 members of city council have said they want. In fact, just earlier this year, there was a motion, maybe we should update the strategic plan to consider other options. And William Casanas couldn't get a second on it. They didn't want to think about anything except for BART TOD. So that's what it's going to be.
Thank you very much. The next question is related to BART. BART and the transit agencies routinely include exit clauses in their contracts. In California, Government Code 1090 allows agencies to void contracts. Can El Cerrito residents be guaranteed that the initial agreement will remain in place and rent will remain at $1 per year?
Yeah, so California Code Section 1090 only allows an agency to cancel a contract if there was fraud by one of the decision makers. So I don't know how that completely pertains to this particular issue. However, exit clauses potentially is something that we should be looking at and have as a concern. But we're not going to negotiate with BART until we have the actual funds to potentially move forward with them. And so any negotiation that has to happen can only be done once the Measure C passes. And we should make sure that those clauses are not in the contract so that we do get a contract that has $1 a year rent for the intended amount of time. So those clauses haven't been negotiated yet. We still have an opportunity to make sure they're not put in the contract. Thank you.
I mean, if we haven't, the city's been negotiating with BART for years, and if we haven't been, why did the Yes campaign go around telling people there was $1 a year, lease potential? And why is the city telling people that?
We can't go back and forth.
Okay. Well, I would just say that, the city has obviously been talking with BART for a long time. That is where the $1 a year claim that has been central to the city's plans on this have come from. And BART's in a lot of trouble. We all know we're going to be asked to vote yes on a major BART tax coming up in November. Personally, one of the things that upsets me most about this proposal is the idea that we would be spending all of this money on a library on land we would not even own. We should own civic buildings. It's as simple as that. I don't want to bet our community's future on the financial solvency and management of BART.
Thank you very much. Political consequences. What happens if the Jarvis Amendment passes and taxes pass with less than a 2/3 vote are invalidated? And I'm going to go to the next one. If the transportation tax does not pass in November or BART has other problems, will that impact the possible construction of the library at the El Cerrito Plaza?
Yeah, Genevieve, I'm going to try and answer both of those. The city attorney made it very clear that the Harvard Jarvis tax has a couple of hurdles, including an amendment that the state legislature put in place. So the courts will not are very unlikely to overturn the vote that we put in place in June. The transportation portion of BART, which operates the trains and the stations, is a completely separate entity than the land holding. And the land holding components of BART are actually making money. And so that portion of the government entity is not necessarily going to go away. So our agreements with BART are with the land holding portion, and they will be honored regardless of whether the operating side ends, stops moving trains or not.
Okay. Mr. Nowinski?
I was the person at February 19th who raised, when we were scheduling when this election would be at City Hall, who raised the Jarvis Amendment to the city. The city attorney looked a little blindsided by it and gave a bit of an overconfident answer that he then walked back in some of his written memos on it. I would say we have no idea. It is extraordinarily possible that this will be overturned by constitutional amendment in November. Anyone who tells you otherwise is, at best wishful thinking. The folks at Jarvis, well, they have good attorneys. They don't put up ballot questions that lose. And they've definitely thought through the details here a little bit more, I think, than the city attorney did when he had to answer a question about this on the spot on February 19th. So I would be very leery from this. And we know that paying for legal defenses is one of the things that this tax specifically says you're allowed to use tax revenue on. We could have avoided the whole situation by having it in November. We're doing it in June instead.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we ran out of time to answer all the questions, but I think that all the areas were covered. So we are now down to the closing statements. And so it's 6:22. So closing statements, please. 3 minutes. Start with Mr. Lyman.
Yeah, regardless of how the vote turns out in June, we will still be a community that shares more than we disagree on, including a belief in the value of libraries. I believe we are all passionate about this tax measure because we all love El Cerrito and want a common good. We disagree on how to achieve that common good. To me, nothing speaks more clearly to our shared values than a community coming together to create something that serves everyone, especially those who need it the most. Children just starting out, students trying to get ahead, job seekers looking for opportunity, seniors staying engaged, and immigrants building new lives. A library does that, and it does it in a way that is open, welcoming, and inclusive. No barriers, no gatekeeping, a truly public space where everyone belongs. So in the end, this comes down to our shared values. Do we invest in the shared spaces that make our city more livable, more inclusive, and more connected? Measure C gives us the chance to say yes, to affirm that we believe in investing in our community and its future. I believe El Cerrito is the kind of place that steps up for that kind of future, one that invests in people, opportunity, and the common good. That's why I'm supporting Measure C, and I hope you will too. For more information about the campaign, please visit our website, www.anewelcerritolibrary.com. And don't forget to vote on June 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nowinski?
Yep. So Neighbors for a Better El Cerrito is an entirely grassroots operation. It started with 5 people a little over a year ago, and has grown to be one of the sort of largest grassroots campaigns that El Cerrito has ever seen. We have over 650 people have engaged. We've raised 99.99% of every dollar from El Cerrito. We have no big checks from nonprofits, no big checks from city contractors. And it's because we care about our community. We care about our library, and we want to plan, and we care about the other competing priorities and big expenses that the city has coming up. We don't want to write to say yes for a ballot question that is, gives financial room to the city to build whatever it is that City Hall decides they would like. We've seen what happens in the past. The cities decided they wanted a splashy new building and spent down our resources in order to get us there. And then we wind up on the state, auditor's watch list as a result. We believe that El Cerrito should be, run in a financially prudent way, that we should build great things, that we should prioritize and have a truly democratic process, not just go with, library recommendations from a consultant. I've kept coming back to this. There's a difference between what we've seen in what supporters in the city tell us about what they would like Measure C to be and what's actually in the fine print. And I would urge everyone to go back or to turn in your ballots, to vote no on Measure C, and to send the city back to the drawing board to come up with something that actually reflects what we want as a community. There's some of the questions we didn't get to today, talking about like size and what does a modern library look like. And the key thing for me is a modern library should reflect what we want as a community our library to be, not a study from when Barack Obama was president before the world changed on, what best practices on a library was. I've talked to dozens of neighbors who went to the city's workshops on libraries years ago, and they say they didn't care about our feedback. It was just a presentation about what they wanted to do. And that's what this has been about since day one. This is about the BART TOD plan, where the city wants to build a library there. And we just got to say no. We got to say, guys, you need to include the city. We need to weigh competing priorities. We need to go back to the drawing board and figure out a plan that actually makes sense for our community, makes sense for a great future library, makes sense for the potential for senior center or updates to the police and fire building. We need a good deal for El Cerrito, not a good deal for BART and related companies.
Well, thank you very much. And our presenters are very much appreciated for being with us today, and all the persons that are on the Zoom. Let's see. So we know some of you answers were not answered, the questions, but it started the conversation, and you can all send emails to the different groups and ask more questions, and I'm sure they will respond with the answers that you need to hear. So we welcome any of you to join the League of Women Voters in doing the hands-on work to empower voters and defend democracy. Please vote on June 2nd, 2026. Yes, vote. And thank you very much. This concludes our forum today. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.